For 12 long years, Georgia Hayes's job was to copy plantation records. Think about that. Estate inventories, bills of sale, day in and day out, it was grim, routine work where human beings were just numbers on a page. Her entire career was built on having a steady hand and an unreadable face. But one day, sometime in the 1840s, a particular ledger from a Virginia planter's estate made her hand literally freeze.
So, today, we're diving deep into a piece of hidden history. This is a story of systematic cruelty, yeah, but it's also about how that cruelty was brought to light by the meticulous, dangerous work of one incredibly courageous woman who was armed with pretty much nothing more than a pen and a secret notebook.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Our story really begins with Georgia Hayes. She's a free black woman, a copyist in Richmond, Virginia. She's built her life on two things: precision and caution. Her father's advice was her mantra: keep your head down, make yourself valuable, but never, ever indispensable. Well, a single document was about to make her break every single one of those rules.
Inside this one document was something Georgia had never, ever seen before. 23 children, all of them under 10 years old, described with this obsessive, almost poetic detail you'd use for a work of art. But right next to these angelic descriptions was that one brutal word: property. And what was even more shocking? Their values. These were astronomical sums, rivaling what you'd pay for a prime field hand. It made no sense.
Her mind is just racing, right? So Georgia, as carefully as she can, asks the Hanover County clerk about the unusually high prices. The clerk, he barely even looks up from his papers and just offers this casual two-word explanation that basically opened a doorway to a world of unimaginable horror. He just says, "Draper? Oh, he specialized in fancy stock."
Fancy stock. Georgia had heard the term before, whispered with fear and disgust. It was this specific, uniquely cruel corner of the slave trade. See, these weren't people being sold for their strength in the fields. No, they were sold for their looks, to be displayed like ornaments in a rich man's house. And Georgia had just found a catalog of 23 children, all listed for this exact purpose.
That night, Georgia does something she's never done. Something that goes against her father's every warning. She starts a private notebook, and she copies down the names and descriptions of those 23 children. She didn't know exactly why yet, but she had this gut feeling. This went beyond the ordinary, everyday evil of slavery. This felt different. This felt deliberate.
And you know what? Just 2 weeks later, she's working on records from a different county, and there it is again. Another inventory. 5 more children, described with the same chillingly specific language. Complexion nearly white, hair of spun gold, bearing no mark of African descent. And that was it. That confirmed it. This wasn't a coincidence. No way. This was a pattern.
And this right here, this just shows you the terrifying scale of what she was uncovering. She started expanding her business to other counties, not for the money, but just to get access to the records. And her secret ledger just exploded. Look at this. Within a single year, the number of names she documented more than tripled. This wasn't just a few bad actors. This was organized.
So as Georgia starts mapping out the names of the planters, she realizes they're not strangers to each other. Not at all. They were a brotherhood, a tight-knit network of Virginia's elite. They were connected through agricultural societies that were supposedly focused on livestock breeding. They were connected through the state legislature. And of course, they were connected by marriage. They were all in on it together.
But Georgia knew she needed to understand the mechanics. How did this horrible system actually work from the inside? So she took this immense risk. She arranged a secret meeting with 3 enslaved women. Their names were Grace, Phyllis, and Sarah, in the basement of the Second African Baptist Church. And what these women told her, it was worse than anything she could have possibly imagined. They described this cold, calculated, almost industrial-like breeding program. Women with light skin were selected. They were isolated, their children were raised separately, given better food, better clothes, and taught to speak and act refined, all to make them premium merchandise for the fancy trade. It was a production line for human ornaments.
Now, Georgia had been noticing these initials, LS, scribbled in some of the records. So she mentions them to the women, and their faces just go pale. Laurent Savard. He was a notorious dealer in New Orleans. And that was the missing piece. He was the hub of the entire operation. He had advance arrangements to buy these specific children the moment a planter died.
So, as her investigation got closer and closer to the heart of this conspiracy, things got way more dangerous. It turns out a clerk in Henrico County, a man named William Graves, had noticed the same patterns. He trusted Georgia's discretion, and he shared definitive proof with her. Private letters between the planters and Savard, talking about merchandise and breeding stock. He even had a profit-sharing ledger for the whole network, the smoking gun.
Graves promised he'd make a copy of this explosive ledger for her. But when Georgia showed up for their secret meeting a week later, his office was ransacked, and Graves was gone. His body was found in the river the very next morning. The official cause of death? The coroner ruled it a tragic, unfortunate accident. Yeah, right. And just in case the message wasn't clear enough, later that night, Sheriff Coleman himself delivered a message that was anything but accidental. He let her know that he knew she was investigating. He knew she'd been asking questions, and the threat was crystal clear. Stay quiet, or you will disappear just as thoroughly as William Graves did. This thing, it was protected at the highest levels.
But here's the thing about Georgia. She didn't stop. She couldn't. Threatened into silence, she just changed her methods. She continued her work quietly, documenting everything she could, and then sending these carefully worded anonymous reports north to abolitionist societies. Her information, even though it had to be vague to protect her, forced the entire network to go deeper underground.
And then, in 1865, Union soldiers marched into Richmond. When an officer from the brand-new Freedmen's Bureau came looking for clerks to help reunite families torn apart by slavery, Georgia Hayes stepped forward. She reached into the false bottom of her sewing basket and pulled out her private ledger. Her life's work, this dangerous, secret record, had finally found its true purpose.
So what was in that ledger? Well, after 17 years of this secret, dangerous work, Georgia had meticulously documented 179 children, by name. 179 lives, each with a name, who were systematically bred, sold, and whose identities were meant to be completely erased forever. And using her ledger, the Freedmen's Bureau was actually able to trace the records of 43 of those children. Just 43. For most of them, the trail had just gone cold. They'd been resold, or they had died, or they had simply vanished. This number just drives home how incredibly difficult it is to piece together lives that a cruel system tried so hard to obliterate. And then there's this number. 8. Of the 179 names in her book, only 8 children were successfully reunited with their families. It's a painfully small number, isn't it? But each one of those reunions was a profound victory against a system designed to make it impossible. A victory made possible entirely because one woman refused to look away.
And really, this was the heart of her entire mission. It came from a mother whose 6-year-old daughter, Anna, had just been taken for the trade. The mother didn't ask Georgia to save her. She knew that was impossible. All she asked was for Georgia to write Anna's name down, to bear witness, to just make sure that her little girl who was about to be erased from the world was remembered.
Georgia Hayes's ledger became one of the most comprehensive first-hand accounts of this horrific practice. It ensured that 179 children were not just entries on a balance sheet, but names. Names to be remembered. And that leaves us with a final question to think about. If that's the power of remembering, what is the price of forgetting?